Hey Messy family, welcome back to the channel. Now listen, this story time right here, Messy family, is different. It is very heartbreaking, so proceed with caution, all right? In this story time, we have a young lady about to pretty much explain to us how her boyfriend was unalived while coming home from work. Get your tissue boxes, Messy family, because this one is truly heartbreaking.
Story time about how my daughter's dad was unalived in a car accident. He passed February 18th of 2017, and today is his 32nd birthday. So I have been trying to muster up the courage to post on TikTok about his passing, how it happened, how I found out, and the different stages of grief that I went through over the past 8 years. It's been 8 years now. We have a daughter together, his one and only child. She is now 8. She was born September 20th, 2016, and he passed February 18th of 2017. So she was only about 5-6 months at the time of his passing. And I'll just go ahead and get into the story time. So I'll start with the night of his the night before, just to give you a little context so that you can maybe understand a little bit more about him. So the night before, on the 16th of February, he randomly asked me to take a picture of him and my daughter. I just remember taking the picture and his eyes just looking so tired. He just looked exhausted. Keep in mind, it had been a busy week. We did a birthday photo shoot for myself because my birthday was the 27th of February. So we were preparing for that. And it was my 21st birthday. So, we was about to do it big. But it just seemed like he had just been so exhausted. And also we had a 6-month-old baby at the time, so we're also exhausted from that. I remember him asking me to take the picture. I took the picture. He just looked exhausted. And one thing about him is he took pictures at work. For context, he was a club promoter / host, but he was not really big on like personal pictures. He wasn't the type of person who snapped a bunch of flicks. He wasn't the type of person who liked being in a bunch of pictures. But I was the type of person to consistently always be taking a picture, always. So it was kind of odd to me that he wanted me to take a picture of them, which he had never asked me to do that before. Any other time it would just be me doing it on my own. So I took the picture. And that night he had to work, so he left the house at about 11 o'clock to go to work at a club called Diamonds in Atlanta. Formerly Diamonds. It's not Diamonds no more. I don't know if it even still exists. But he left. Prior to him going to work, he asked me, did I want to come with him? Sometimes I would go to work with him at his hostings. And sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I chose to stay home and simply just be a mom. That particular night in question, I did attempt to get a babysitter when he asked me that I wanted to come. Because, of course, I want to go. Like, my birthday is coming up in the next week. I'm ready to get it popping. So, it didn't end up working out. I wasn't able to find a babysitter. So, I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to try too hard. I'm just going to stay home with my baby. And, we going to have a blast next week when it's my birthday. So stayed home, and he left to go to work, and nothing out of the ordinary. I just went to sleep. Me and my daughter went to sleep. I expected to wake up to him as I normally do after he comes home from work at 3 a.m. and that be that. I did have plans the next day. He knew that I had plans, so he knew he needed to be home to keep our daughter for my plans the next day. The fast forward, the next day comes. I wake up at about 7 in the morning, and it just kind of felt a little bit off. I would say I woke up with a heavy heart. Something felt off, but I just thought it might have been my feelings. as a result of him not being home yet. I'm like, 7 o'clock, you not home. What's the deal? So that's what I'm thinking in my head. So of course, the first thing I do is pick up my phone and I call him twice. Call his phone, ring, it rings like normal, no answer. So I'm thinking, you know, he might have stayed out late, fell asleep in his car, maybe, you know, ended up, men be menning. So I don't know what the case was, but I just took it up to the fact that he wasn't home yet and he'll eventually get home and I'll say my piece when he get there. Well, 8 o'clock roll around, he's still not home. So I'm calling again, no answer. I happen to look outside my window to see, like, maybe, you know, thinking maybe, like, you know, he might be sleeping in the car. He might be out there sleeping in the car. His car wasn't out there, but his brother's car was out there. So I go to his brother's car and I knock on the window and I'm like, where's Tony? That's my baby daddy's name. Where's Tony? Also known as T-Mac. And he said, I don't know. I ain't talked to him. I was with him last night, but he didn't come. He didn't follow me home. I left before him. That's what he said. I left before him. And I said, okay, cool. So at this point, I'm kind of like getting furious because I'm like, bro, like, where are you? I got to get ready to leave in a few hours. Like, I need to know if I need to find somebody else to watch my daughter while I go to brunch with my friends. That was my plans for the next day. So I was thinking, like, I need to know if I need to find a backup babysitter or what. So about 9-10 o'clock rolls around, still don't hear from him. So I'm like, okay, this is kind of unlike him at this point. Like, it's 10 o'clock. He's not a late sleeper. Although he does work at the club, he doesn't sleep late. So I'm like, this is odd. Something's not right. But I'ma just deal with it later. Let me go ahead and call my mom and see if she could watch my baby for me while I go to brunch. And I'll get in his ASS later about being, you know, getting home so late. So anyway, call my mom. She's like, yeah, I'll keep her while you go to brunch. And that was that. I get ready. I get my baby ready. We leave the house. And I drop my baby off to my mom. I head to brunch. And brunch had to be like around 12:30, something like that. So I'm enjoying brunch with my friends. Again, this is still on my mind, but at the same time, I'm like, he gonna turn up somewhere. And when he turn up, he gonna have to answer to me. And that'll be that. So I'm talking to my friends about it at lunch. I'm like, I can't believe, like, he really is not answering the phone. Like, I can't believe, like, he really stayed out all night. This is, like, not like him. And they're like, oh, girl, you know, he'll turn up. He'll, you know, you'll hear from him and everything will be fine. So brunch is about over at this point, maybe about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I remember getting in my car immediately following brunch. I hadn't even left the parking lot and I just broke down in tears. I just broke down in tears because at this point it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Wherever you might be, whatever it is you're doing or not doing, it's not right. Something's not right. So I'm like, I couldn't contain my emotions at this point. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't seen you since you left our home at 10 o'clock the night before. Very unlike you, given that we have a 6-month-old baby. So I'm like, you know what? Let me use this opportunity to reach out to his family and see if anybody's heard from him. And maybe he just didn't call me because he's nervous about what the consequences might be. So I call his brother and ask him, his brother, his same brother that was sitting in front of our house sleep in the car when I had woke up that morning. And I called him and I said, have you heard from him yet? And he said, no, I have not heard from him. I said, okay, listen, I need you to figure out the last phone number that he called. Like, it's that simple. I need you to figure out the last phone number so that I could call that phone number and see if that's where he at. He like, all right, sis, I got you. Give me a minute. I'm gonna call you back. All right, I'm running out of time. I'm gonna do a part 2. Head over to part 2 to hear the rest of the story.
every time I hear a story about a tragedy in someone's family, they always say they did something that was so unusual that day when they died. He don't normally like pictures, but that day he wanted to take a picture with his daughter. I'm not gonna lie, that part gave me chills.
I just find it so odd that the brother was at the house and that his brother was supposed to follow him home. He didn't ask him, "Aren't you following me?" Or
I'm just trying to figure out, how's the brother sleeping outside? Like, is that normal? Like,
it must be. But it's like you didn't notice your brother never came back to the house. Especially if y'all went there together, got in leave together.
Right.
So we left out on the part of the story where I asked his brother to figure out the last phone number that he had reached out to the night before, that night. So, and the reason that I asked his brother to do that is because him and his brother was on a joint phone plan. And you know, like how you can look at, you know, the people on your plan's last call, like last few, like 30 days of calls, to be able to see like who the last person that they called was. So that was the reason why I asked him to do that. So he did. He sent me the number. I called the number and it was a girl. I don't remember her name, and for privacy purposes, I'm not going to try to remember her name. But what I will tell you is that I asked her, did she know where he was? And she said, no, I'm not sure. He gave me his number last night in the club, and that was it. Like, she said they didn't leave together, nothing happened. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, I introduced myself to her. I let her know who I was. So it's either she lying to me to protect him, or she telling the truth and really don't know where he is. So I took it at face value. I took her word for what it was, and I proceeded to call the next person. The next person I decided to call was his cousin. His cousin said she had not heard from him. He had not called her, contacted her. At this point, I had kind of reached out to a few different people, and everybody said they had not heard from him. Everybody said they didn't know where he was, nothing. I had even reached out to his roommate back at our college that we went to before we moved back here to Atlanta. And we both went to Albany State. And that's actually where I met him. And his roommate at the time, that's who I reached out to see if he had heard from him. Because it just so happened to also be basketball homecoming weekend of our HBCU, Albany State. So I was thinking maybe, just maybe, at this point, I'm trying to go through all the possibilities. I'm thinking maybe he got on the road to drive down there to host something and just didn't let me know. Like, at this point, I'm thinking like a million different thoughts. I'm thinking like, you know, at this point, it could be anything but what it actually was. So I called my mom in tears. She was like, relax, meet me at XYZ location. It was a Mexican restaurant. She said, meet me here, and, you know, we'll try to figure out where he's at. I said, okay. I drove to meet her, and upon meeting her, I just hop in her car and I start complaining. I'm like, I really cannot believe he is just like out somewhere and not answering the phone. Like, that's kind of crazy to me. And in the midst of me expressing my anger to her about it, I get a phone call from his mom. And at this time, his mom was in a different, no, I think she was in the mountains. She was like on a trip or something. She was on a couple's trip with her husband, which is my baby dad's stepdad. And I'm asking her, I'm like, hey, like, have you heard from him? Like, what's up? Like, do you know where he's at? And I just remember pure silence over the phone for a good 15 seconds. And so at this point, my stomach is getting butterflies. I'm kind of feeling like I'm about to throw up. And all she says is, well, she actually doesn't say anything, but she gave the phone to her husband, and her husband says there was an accident. And I'm like, okay, an accident? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, is he okay? Like, why ain't nobody, what hospital is he at? And another 30 seconds of silence comes on the phone. And they proceed to tell me that he passed away. And I'm like, huh? To the point where they had to repeat themselves because it wasn't resonating for me. Like, I didn't quite understand the words that were coming out of their mouth. So they're like, he passed away. And I just remember letting out the most jolting scream and cry of my life, to the point where I even got out of the car in the parking lot on my hands and knees. Excuse me for my tears. On my hands and knees. My mom was in the driver's seat. My daughter was in the back seat in her car seat. And I just remember letting out the largest cry I've ever cried in my life. And I began screaming, no, like, this can't be real. I don't know what y'all are talking about, because this not true. And I guess it was a bit much for his mom and stepdad, who were on the other side of the phone, because they ended up hanging up the phone on me. Which I understand at this point. I totally get it, because I would have been extremely emotional as well, hearing the screams that came from my mouth. So at this point, my mom is just trying to console me, but it's hard for her to console me, because not only does she know what I'm going through, but my father passed away in a car accident when I was 6. So I can only imagine for her what's going through her head. I can only imagine, like, she's thinking back to the same exact time when she found out very similar information that I did, and how that may have affected her. So anyway, at this point, my mama just drives the car and we head over to my grandma. That's all I remember at this point, at that point, because it was such a hazy moment. And I just remember sitting and feeling like almost lifeless, almost like my body, my soul wasn't in my body anymore. Like, that's what it began to feel like. It felt as if my soul was sitting beside myself. I didn't feel real. So we went to my grandma's house. Everybody came over, all my immediate family, excuse me. And I was just sitting there on the couch. And I wasn't doing anything. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. I couldn't eat. I could barely breathe. I could barely breathe. I was just holding on. And I got this 6-month-old baby. I got this 6-month-old baby. And she looked like her dad. What am I supposed to do at this point? So at this point, I just remember having to shut my phone off, because the amount of phone calls I was receiving was so overwhelming. People wanted answers. People wanted to know what was going on. People wanted to know if it was actually true. Keep in mind, he was very well known. Very well known. So it was just an overwhelming amount of people trying to get in touch with me. If anybody knew what was going on, they knew it was me. So of course everybody's reaching out and calling me. But let me clean myself up. I will make a part 3 I didn't really want to make this in parts. I wanted to get it out as fast as possible, just so that I could enjoy the rest of my day. So I'm gonna make a part 3, come back, and we'll talk more.
I couldn't imagine hearing that information over the phone. I get your mom was on a vacation, so she couldn't really tell her in person.
Right.
But that's like the most heartbreaking thing.
This has to be devastating to lose your provider. I'm not saying she didn't have a job, but I know that has to be devastating. And for her mom to have to get that call on vacation, man.
Luckily, her mother was there when she found out, because I couldn't imagine her being in the car alone, having to drive home after hearing this. She already felt out of body.
Right.
So that's probably why her mother immediately took her to see her mom. Because dealing with something like this, you don't really know the right words to say.
Right.
There's nothing you could really say to make this situation better. You could just be there for them in the corner, hear them out. Especially with a 6-month-old baby.
Messy family, have you guys ever experienced anything like this before? Any advice that you can give her? Drop it in the comment section below. Let's move into the third part.
This is part 3 of how my baby daddy was unalived. And I left off at the part where I was explaining that I had to turn off my phone due to the overwhelming amount of people who were trying to contact me to figure out if this was true. And I had people contacting me that I didn't know. I had people contacting me that were friends of his but not friends of mine. I had family members of both sides contacting me, and I eventually just had to turn off my phone, and I could not even face the fact that I had to possibly inform others of what occurred. And so I do want to backtrack just a little bit and say that the police did state that they attempted to go to the address on his license. The address on his license, I'm assuming, was his mother's address, because I know it wasn't my address. So I'm assuming it was his mother's address, and because she was not in town at the time, she was out of town. So because she was not in town at the time, they were unable to, you know, get in touch with someone to inform them of his passing. And to me, it just kind of felt like they didn't try hard enough to contact someone, because it took the family contacting the police for them to figure out exactly what happened. So anyhow, fast forward, I want to now talk about the funeral process and how we went about that. It's not really a lot to tell there, but I will tell what I can remember, what I can recall, because like I said, that whole time for me was like I was kind of in a blank headspace, but nonetheless I do remember bits and pieces. So I just remember, like, his mother, thank you God for her, that she allowed me to be a part of the process, because I will say that did help me with my grief. It did help me figure out like how I felt over time. And I remember her calling me and telling me that they were going to view the body. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, I definitely want to be a part of it. I don't know how I feel about seeing him, you know, lifeless. But, you know, like, this was my last opportunity to put eyes on him, and I wanted every chance I could take to do that. So I remember we went to the funeral home, excuse me. We went to the funeral home. Unfortunately, we didn't need to ID him because he had his license on him. So there was no reason to go to the coroner's office. So after the coroner's office transferred his body to the funeral home that we selected for him to do you know, the funeral process and the burial and all that stuff. Once they retrieved his body, they let us know, and they asked us to come to the funeral home before preparing him for his casket. And I don't remember too much of the process. His mom did most of that stuff, like picking out and all the arrangements and picking his casket and stuff like that. I wasn't really too much a part of that, which I was completely okay with. I didn't feel inclined to be either. But I do remember going to the funeral home, and the feeling that I felt when I entered the parking lot of the funeral home was just a feeling of fullness. Like, I felt full, but not full in the aspect of full like I didn't feel like, I felt like almost like my everything on the inside of me was expanding. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I just felt like, I don't know how to describe the feeling, but I just felt really full. So we went inside the funeral home. We waited for about 5 minutes before they allowed us to go into the room. His mom went in first, and then about 2 minutes later I followed in behind her, and I just remember going in with my eyes closed and opening my eyes, and there he was, lifeless, soulless. Like, he looked like himself, but he almost didn't look real to me, almost like a wax figure. And so in my mind, I'm coming up with all these scenarios, like, this can't really be him. Like, he had a few bruises and bumps and lacerations, but most of the damage that was done was internal from the car accident. So it wasn't a lot. Like, he was able to have an open casket because he didn't have really any like damages to his face or anything like that. I think it was like a small laceration on his head, and then a few lacerations on his hand from the glass breaking in the car at the time of the impact. But other than that, I don't remember seeing any bad injuries on him. So as I'm looking at him, I'm just, at this point, I'm feeling hopeless, even more hopeless than I already felt, because now it's real. His body is on this table. He's not moving. I'm almost trying to, like, in a way, get him to wake up, because I'm like, maybe if I'm here and I, you know, he feel me touch his hand or something, like, I'm thinking like this might bring him back. Like, that's crazy now that I think about it. But at the time, when you're going through this, you know, for a lot of people, because it doesn't feel real, you almost think like, I could almost pretty much maybe do anything. And you're at this point trying to do anything to bring this person back. But, you know, obviously he didn't come back. So we had our little 10 minutes in there. And at this point, it became real for me. It became real. Now that I saw his body laying there, I had no choice but to accept it, because he didn't wake up. Again, at the time, my daughter's 6 months. She obviously doesn't remember any of this, and probably won't ever be able to recall any of this, which I am glad for, because this is not something that I would wish for any child to feel. So over the course of the next few days, the funeral planning began. You know, picking out the clothes that he was going to be buried in, and just really trying to gather my thoughts. I do remember being offered to speak at his funeral, and at the time I declined. But during the funeral, I do remember speaking. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I do have a lot of people still to this day tell me they remember my words and how my words touched them. I don't remember what I said. I was speaking from the heart. But I felt obligated to talk because, you know, a lot of people want to hear from the people who are mourning the most. And I felt I kind of owed it to our friends and family to update them on exactly how I was doing and my exact feelings at the moment. So I did. And I'm glad I did. I feel like it kind of gave me a sense of relief with the situation. And time is still running out, so I'm gonna have to do a part 4, and I think I could finish and wrap this up in part 4. So come to part 4 to hear hopefully what is the final part of this story.
All right, Messy Fam, if you've made it this far in the video, what are your thoughts so far? Now, we will be getting into the last part of this just to wrap it up, but what are your guys' thoughts on this whole situation if you've been in this story time this long? Drop your comments in the chat below. Let's get into this last part.
Part 4, and hopefully what will be the final part of how my baby daddy was unalived. And we left off on the part where I talked about speaking at the funeral and how I just basically said my piece, and I did that to comfort myself and comfort those who also loved me and cared about me and how I felt. And I just kind of wanted to give a speech, I guess you would say, at the funeral, to basically let people know, like, yes, I'm grieving, yes, I feel all this, but I will be fine. And so it took a lot of courage for me to even get up and say my piece at such a just crazy time period of my life. So the funeral was over. Over the next coming weeks, I would begin to figure out how he passed. And this is when I feel like I gained the most closure about the situation. This is when I started to feel a sense of relief, just because I was able to figure out what occurred. So I won't make it long and drawn out. He passed away in a car accident around 3-4 in the morning, between the hours of 3 or 4 a.m. on February 18th of 2017. He was unfortunately in a head-on collision about 2 minutes from our home while he was on the way home. According to the police, he fell asleep at the wheel. I don't too much believe that, but I can only say so much, and I can only defend it so much because he's not here to speak for himself. I will say, as part of my grieving process, a few weeks after his passing, I did visit a medium. Let me know if y'all want me to talk about how that went, because he did talk about his passing himself when I went to visit the medium. But the police said that he fell asleep at the wheel and it was a head-on collision. After doing the investigation of how the cars and vehicles were positioned and such on and such, they basically summed it up like it was, the accident was his fault. The people whom was also involved in the head-on collision with him, he was in the car alone, but the people who were in the other vehicle, they did survive. They, I believe, had a few injuries because of the speed I think that both vehicles were going at. And for context, my daughter's dad drove a Nissan Altima Coupe. If you know that car, you know that vehicle is a smaller vehicle. Granted, it does have 5 seats, but the back seat is small. And I remember before I had my daughter getting onto him about the fact that he needed a different vehicle because that vehicle was not safe for my daughter to ride in. in case there was an accident. He did what he wanted to do, and he kept the vehicle. And that was a part of his demise. I hate to say it. Because knowing that I stated that he should have changed cars, picked a different vehicle, it ate me up. It ate me up that I didn't press the issue more. But you can only make people do what they want. You can only allow people to do what they want to do. So anyway, they said it was his fault. So about a week later, I was able to go to the police precinct and retrieve a copy of the incident report, and I was able to also retrieve a copy of the pictures that the investigators took of the accident site. It was definitely hard for me to see those. They were very graphic, but it did help with a part of my closure, because I was very unsure if he had experienced any pain at all. According to the coroner's report, he passed on impact. He died on impact immediately. Like, there was nothing else to say about that. They said he died on impact, and he didn't experience any pain. At the time, I do remember a lot of people saying, wear your seatbelt, wear your seatbelt. He had his seatbelt on. I do remember a lot of people saying, don't drink and drive, don't drink and drive. His accident was not at all relative to the fact that he was intoxicated while driving. It had nothing to do with that at all. They basically stated he fell asleep at the wheel. And I remember in part 1, I told y'all he looked so tired. He just looked drained. And so for a second, I believed it. But after speaking with a medium, I kind of moved away from that theory. Like, it kind of didn't make the most sense to me. But yeah, so once I found out what happened, and how exactly things happened, I was able to kind of take another step forward in my grieving process. And from then on out, I kind of just flooded myself in work and school. I will say I did not do very well in school at the time, just due to my many stages of grief that I was going through. School was the last thing on my mind. I spent a lot of time hanging out with my friends. I spent a lot of time in the club. I spent a lot of time drinking. Thank God I was sheltered from drugs, and that he protected me through that time. But it was a trying time for me. And at this point in my life, I have moved past it. I'm able to talk about it with very few tears. But being that today is his birthday, I always feel it the most on his birthday and the day that he passed. And my daughter's birthday, that's the days that I feel it the most, because those are important days for him and important days for me. So I do want to say thank you to everybody over the years who have continued to be a part of my daughter's life and stay true to their word on being there for both of us and my family, and everybody that helped me get through that period of time in my life. I encountered a lot of good people. I encountered a lot of good people who continue to check on us and make sure, still to this day. So that is the end of my story time.
Now, even though this story is not viral, it's still very touching to me. It's very touching to my lady here. So we still decided to move forward with this story time, because I feel like these stories actually what makes this channel what it is, because there's so much outreach in these stories. So Messy family, do this. Please follow the creator, support her, and get her channel pushing. Because if anything, I know it's been about over 8 years, but as you can see, this story is about a month old and it's still affecting her 8.5 years later. Her name will be linked in the description box, so please go find her and follow her for more updates.
I know a lot of our audience can resonate with losing a loved one, so we can all just pray for you guys and pray for her, especially losing a spouse, a father, and just somebody in the community that a lot of people knew. This is a tragedy for many.
Right.
We just keep her in our hearts, and anyone that has dealt with something like this, it's not easy, but the best thing you can do is surround yourself with people that love you and support you. That's what this channel is about. So support the creator. And if you've been through this, we're praying for you and everyone involved.
That's all, Messy family. That's going to pretty much wrap up this story time. We will see you guys in the next story time. Peace.